Look at every painting you've ever seen of someone praying. Look at every stained glass window, every statue, every photo your grandmother kept on her nightstand. One hand, always one hand. The right one, usually pressed to the chest or raised or folded neatly over the left like it's being told to stay quiet. And that word, sinister, the one we use for anything dark or untrustworthy, it comes from the Latin word for left. For centuries, the left hand wasn't just ignored in prayer. It was treated as the hand you couldn't trust. But that's exactly what makes this next part so strange. Because Jesus taught something with that hand, the one everyone was told to distrust. A gesture, a posture, a piece of instruction that wasn't for the crowds gathered on the hillside. It was for a smaller group. People who had earned something. People who had stayed close enough, long enough, to be shown what everyone else wasn't ready for. This isn't superstition. This isn't a made-up legend. This is a thread buried inside teachings that got quietly narrowed down over centuries, until only one version survived in public memory. By the end of this video, you're going to look at your own hands differently. I promise you that. There was a moment. The sun has just gone down over the hills, and the heat of the day is finally letting go. Inside a small room off a quiet courtyard, a single oil lamp burns in the corner, its flame bending sideways in the draft, throwing restless shadows across the walls. This is where Jesus and a handful of his closest followers have been staying these past few days, away from the crowds, just the ones who never quite leave once the teaching outside winds down. Tonight, maybe 10 people. Nobody is talking, not because nothing is happening, because everyone in the room already senses something is about to. Jesus is seated near the center, quiet now, nothing like the way he taught the crowd earlier that day. Then he raises his hand, not the one he usually raises to make a point. The other one, the left. He holds it near his chest, palm turned inward, fingers loose. Small, quiet, easy to miss if you weren't already leaning in. Then he says something, low, barely past the people closest to him. One of the disciples, new enough to the group that he's only recently started staying behind in the evenings, feels his breath catch. He glances at the others, expecting the same shock on their faces. But no one looks surprised. A few nod slightly, familiar, like this is simply part of who their teacher is. So he stays quiet. He watches. He memorizes the angle of the palm, the stillness in it, the tone of those few words. Nobody writes it down that night. There's no need. This is private, among people who trust each other to remember. But that disciple carries it with him. For years. Long after the lamp burned out, long after the room emptied, long after the version of this story passed down stopped mentioning the left hand, or what was said beside it, at all. That's the thread. That's what we're pulling on for the rest of this video. I think about that room a lot. Not because I know exactly what was said inside it. Nobody alive today does. But because the idea behind it is bigger than one moment. It reaches back further than Jesus, into the way ancient people understood the human body itself. Across the ancient world, long before Christianity had a name, the right hand and the left hand were never treated as equal. The right hand was the hand of action. The hand you used to shake on a deal, to swear an oath, to lift a sword, to hand someone bread in front of witnesses. It was public. It was official. It was the hand the world could see and judge. The left hand carried a completely different weight. It wasn't considered lesser in the spiritual sense. It was considered private, internal. The hand closer to the heart, both literally, in terms of anatomy, and symbolically, in terms of meaning. While the right hand gave, the left hand was often associated with receiving. Not receiving objects, receiving insight. Receiving something that couldn't be handed over in public, because it wasn't the kind of thing a crowd could hold on to responsibly. This idea shows up again and again if you look closely enough. Ancient teachers, mystics, and healers across many cultures treated the left side of the body as the receptive side, the side connected to intuition rather than declaration. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life studying symbols and the unconscious mind, wrote extensively about this exact left-right divide, describing the left as the doorway to the inner world, and the right as the doorway to the outer one. I find that distinction more honest than mystical, if I'm being straight with you. It's not that one hand is magic and the other isn't. It's that human beings have always sensed a difference between the part of us that performs for others and the part of us that sits quietly with truth before we're ready to say it out loud. The right hand does. The left hand knows. And once you see that pattern, you start to understand why a private teaching moment, tucked inside a room with only a handful of trusted people, would naturally involve the hand nobody used to prove anything to anybody. That's not decoration. That's design. But it raises a bigger question. If this gesture was reserved for a smaller group, what exactly made someone worthy of being in that room in the first place? I want to clear something up right now because this word gets misused constantly. Chosen ones does not mean better. It does not mean superior, special by birth, or loved more than anyone standing outside that room. I don't believe that for a second, and honestly, I think that misreading has caused more damage inside religious communities than almost any other idea people cling to. What it actually meant, in the context of that private teaching, was readiness. Ancient teaching traditions, not just in the region where Jesus taught, but across many spiritual cultures at the time, commonly used a layered method of instruction. There was the outer teaching given to everyone, simple enough to be understood in a single sitting. And there was the inner teaching, given only to those who stayed close, asked deeper questions, and showed they could sit with an idea without immediately needing to simplify it or argue with it. This wasn't gatekeeping for the sake of power. Think about it practically. If you hand someone a complex, weighty truth before they've built the emotional and spiritual capacity to hold it, it doesn't help them. It can actually confuse them, or worse, get twisted into something harmful in their hands. Jesus, teaching in parables to the general crowd, was doing exactly this, giving stories simple enough to plant a seed, while saving the deeper unpacking for people who had already shown up, again and again, willing to sit in the discomfort of not fully understanding yet. I genuinely believe this is one of the most misunderstood parts of his entire teaching style. People assume Jesus spoke plainly to everyone all the time. He didn't. Scripture itself shows him explaining parables privately to his closest followers after speaking to crowds in symbols and stories. The public got the seed. The chosen few, meaning the ready few, got the explanation of how the seed actually grows. So when you hear chosen ones connected to this left-hand teaching, don't picture an exclusive club stamped with favoritism. Picture a small group of people who simply hadn't left the room yet. People who kept staying long after the easy answers ran out. And that's exactly the group standing there in that dim-lit room when the left hand was lifted. Now here's where the story shifts from the personal to the institutional. And I want to be careful here, because I'm not interested in painting anyone as villains. I'm interested in being honest about how organizations work. As the early Christian movement grew from small gatherings into massive, structured institutions spanning entire empires, something had to happen that always happens when a small, intimate teaching gets scaled up to millions of people. It gets simplified. You cannot teach nuance to a crowd of thousands the same way you teach it to a dozen people sitting in a room with you. Institutions need consistency. They need one clear posture, one clear gesture, one clear rule that can be taught the exact same way in a village 1,000 miles from where the original teaching happened. The right hand, already associated across cultures with oath-taking, public commitment, and formal declaration, became the natural choice for standardized practice. Think about how oaths were sworn in courtrooms and temples across the ancient world. The right hand, almost universally. It made sense, administratively, to build public prayer practice around a gesture that already carried the weight of formal, official commitment. It was clean. It was teachable. It didn't require explaining an inner layer of symbolism to every single new convert joining a congregation of thousands. Here's my honest opinion on this, and you can disagree with me if you want. I don't think this was some dark conspiracy to hide truth out of malice. I think it was what almost always happens when something deeply personal gets converted into something mass-produced. The soul of the teaching survives. The layers around it get flattened out for the sake of order. But flattening isn't the same as erasing. The deeper layer didn't disappear from existence. It disappeared from common teaching. It kept living quietly in mystical branches, in contemplative traditions, in the writings of monks and mystics who kept exploring what the institution stopped emphasizing. Which brings us to the part of this video I've genuinely been waiting to get to. Go back with me to that room. The lamp still flickering. The disciples still leaning in. Jesus raises the left hand, palm turned inward, and he says those few quiet words, the ones nobody wrote down, the ones that never made it into the version of the story most people were taught. In that gesture, and in whatever was said beside it, he's not teaching a rule. He's teaching a direction inward instead of outward. Here's what I believe, based on everything this symbolism points toward across mystical Christian tradition, contemplative practice, and the broader esoteric threads woven through ancient spirituality. The left hand represents surrender rather than assertion. It represents listening rather than declaring. When your right hand reaches outward, into the world, toward others, toward action, your left hand, resting closer to your heart, is where you receive what the world can't give you. Insight, stillness, the quiet knowing that doesn't come from effort, but from finally being still enough to hear it. Prayer with the right hand alone teaches you to ask. Prayer that includes the left hand, quiet, inward, resting near the chest, teaches you to receive. And those are not the same spiritual posture. Asking keeps you in a position of need, reaching towards something outside yourself. Receiving puts you in a position of readiness, opening space for something to arrive. I don't think this was ever meant to replace the right hand. I think it was meant to complete it. The outward reach and the inward opening, together, forming a full circuit instead of a one-directional plea. This is where the esoteric depth really lives. In many contemplative Christian mystic traditions that survived quietly through the centuries, separate from mainstream public liturgy, practitioners describe the left side of the body as the seat of receptivity in meditative prayer, a concept echoed by figures like the medieval mystic Hildegard of Bingen, a Benedictine abbess known for her visionary writings on the inner spiritual body. This wasn't fringe nonsense. It was serious contemplative theology that simply never made it into the version of Christianity taught to the masses. When I sit with this idea myself, here's what changes for me personally. Praying only with the outward hand can start to feel like shouting into a room and leaving before the answer comes. Including the inward hand, even just quietly resting it near your chest while you pray, turns that same moment into something closer to a conversation. You ask, and then physically, symbolically, you make space to receive. That is the secret this whole video has been circling. Not a magic gesture, a completed posture. A full loop between reaching and receiving that got cut in half when the teaching became mass practice, and lost the words that once explained it too. So what do you actually do with this? I'm not telling you to abandon how you've always prayed. I'm not telling you the version you grew up with was wrong or empty. I'm telling you it might have been incomplete, and that incompleteness was never your fault. It was baked into the practice long before you were born. Here's what I'd gently invite you to try. Next time you sit in prayer or quiet reflection, don't just reach outward with your right hand the way you always have. Let your left hand rest near your heart, or open in your lap, palm up, not asking for anything, just staying open. Let it be your reminder that prayer isn't only about sending words out. It's also about making room to receive something back. You don't need permission from an institution to do this. You don't need a new denomination or a new label. This is simply completing a posture that was always meant to be whole. When I started doing this myself, something shifted. Not overnight, not dramatically, but slowly, prayer stopped feeling like a one-way transmission into silence. It started feeling like sitting across from someone who's actually listening, and who wants me to listen back. That's what I believe this teaching was always meant to offer. Not a secret code, not a hidden trick, just balance between the hand that reaches for the world and the hand that stays close enough to your heart to actually receive what the world can't give you. So go back to that image you started this video with. Every painting, every statue, one hand raised, the other quietly forgotten. Maybe now you understand why. Not because the left hand was ever dangerous or forbidden in some sinister sense, but because a small, intimate teaching, meant for a handful of people ready to receive it, eventually had to be simplified for millions of people who needed something quick and consistent to hold on to. But you don't have to leave it simplified. You know the fuller version now. The reaching hand and the receiving hand. The one that asks and the one that listens. I'd genuinely love to know what this brought up for you. Drop a comment and tell me how you pray and whether this changes anything for you going forward. And if this kind of hidden teaching speaks to something in you, stay close. There's more of this thread still waiting to be pulled.